How are you looking at what the government has been able to do in terms of the fiscal math? What would concern you, if anything at all?
Well, obviously, we're very much focused on the fiscal consolidation roadmap that the government had set, particularly aligned with the FRBM targets. We expected modest slippage this year, so very much in line with our expectations, 3.4% of GDP. I think what's of a little bit more concern is the following year, keeping the target at 3.4, effectively a pause rather than continuing to focus on consolidation. We understand what the objectives of the government are, but ultimately we see increased expenditure without any offsets from the revenue side. It's just going to make it more challenging to achieve those targets over time. And so that's something we're going to continue to focus on, because the biggest credit challenge for India, obviously, is the fiscal position. And when you add in the states, it's even more complicated.
Yes, it certainly is more complicated if you add on the states. But William, on the back of what you've seen the government announce with this farm package, the 75,000 crore rupee package that they have announced, with FY19 getting an allocation of 20,000 crore rupees, what do you make of what has been provided for, and this farm package in general, and its ability to be able to alleviate the concerns of the agri sector?
Well, obviously there are many possible options that the government had on the table. I think all things considered, this is trying to target the most needy of the group, which is of course good. Implementation will be key, because we've seen in the past, obviously, there have been programs that have been designed, but implementation and follow-through is very important in terms of delivery and ultimately achieving the efficiencies of that spending that are intended. So we'll need to wait and see to what extent they're implemented in full, but I think the direct transfer programs fundamentally are well targeted, and hopefully they'll provide the support that the rural farmer needs, and they certainly will contribute to consumption next year that should be positive for growth.
I want to very quickly ask you about the assumptions that have been made as far as taxes are concerned. And while we have seen buoyancy on the personal tax front, it's the indirect tax side that concerns are being raised, largely because there is that 1 lakh crore rupee shortfall on the GST. So on taxes, what has been assumed in the budgetary estimates, how do you read them?
Well, we need to look at them more closely, but fundamentally what we saw last year in the budget was raise some concerns about the aggressiveness of the assumptions. At the time, the expectation was an increase in GST collections from 2.6% of GDP to 4%. This year, there's still challenges around indirect taxes, and again, implementation is really the key. We've seen several changes to the rates and obviously the exemption limits. So I think those are going to pose increasing challenges moving forward in terms of the ability to continue to collect the GST collections to the extent that the government would like, because the fact is that while basically you're taking more people out of the tax net, which will be somewhat challenging. But if you have increased compliance, and hopefully that's ultimately the intent, to try to ease compliance, then that could mitigate some of that risk. But we do see ultimately revenues as being a challenge based on the fact that there have been multiple changes to the GST over the last year.